Hi, I'm Angelica Tyler with Buncombe County's CAPE team, our Communications and Public Engagement team. I'm here today with Ariel Zijp. She is the Program Manager for Ag and Land Resources, and we're going to be talking today about the Open Space Bond and specifically conservation efforts here in Buncombe County. So we'll go ahead and get started. Ariel, what makes you really passionate about this work?
I'm really passionate about this work because I grew up on a farm, I've worked on many farms, I live on a farm. I want to be able to help our farm and landowners in Buncombe County to protect their land so that they have land to farm in the future.
So how will the open space bonds help fund conservation here in Buncombe County?
The Open Space Bond funds will help us fund more projects and fund them quicker. So right now we're really bound by our grant fund abilities. I guess we have access to just a handful of grants, and each have limits to the amount of funds available for every county. So basically, this will allow us to have more access to funds and to be able to move on projects quicker rather than waiting around on grant cycles. So this will allow us to work on time-sensitive projects that we would typically have to spend a lot more time waiting around.
So why might a landowner in Buncombe County consider conservation or using a conservation easement?
So I think most landowners that would consider a conservation easement would consider it because they're very passionate about their land. They're passionate about either based on the fact that they have worked on their farm their whole life, they grew up on it, or they just have a certain special passion for protecting the natural landscape.
What is a conservation easement? What is it really? How does it work?
So a conservation easement is basically an agreement between a landowner and a conservation organization. So a conservation organization can be a local land trust or a soil and water district like Buncombe Soil and Water. So there is an agreement where the landowner basically agrees to refrain from development and protect their natural resources. And in response to that, the conservation organization upholds the conservation easement deed as well as agrees to visit that property once a year in perpetuity to make sure that no changes have happened since the deed was signed. So basically the landowner needs to agree to protect their property and not do development, and the conservation organization agrees to see that commitment through in perpetuity.
So that relationship kind of extends for the lifetime.
It extends past a landowner's lifetime and continually follows the property through all landowners in the future. So really an easement is bound to the property, not the landowner.
Who holds the conservation easements? I think you touched on this, but can you just kind of break that down a little bit for someone who's not as familiar?
Yeah, so basically the holder of the easement would be the conservation organization. So that would either be Buncombe Soil and Water or a local land trust. So really we are seen as holding the easement as like we are the protectors of the easement. We are we're following that property every year in perpetuity. The Ariels of the future will be out there monitoring these easements, making sure no development happens.
Are there different kinds of easements for different kinds of properties, or can landowners opt into different kinds of easements?
Yeah, there's really two basic types of conservation easements. One is called a donation easement, where the landowner donates fully their development rights. They are receiving no compensation. Sometimes that has higher tax benefits than others, sometimes not. Then we also have what is called the bargain sale easement purchase. And so this is where a landowner is compensated for just a percentage of their development rights. So in either scenario, landowners are giving up some amount of value of their property. They're not ever being compensated at 100% of those development rights.
So let's say I've decided to put some of my land or maybe all of my land in a conservation easement. What's next?
Yeah. So first step would be to decide if you wanted to work with a local land trust or work with Buncombe County Soil and Water Conservation District. So some folks prefer to work with a nonprofit versus a county agency or vice versa. So really that's the first decision. And once you've made that decision, you would contact either Soil and Water or a land trust. And then we really start that process. And both processes look similar, but I can really mostly speak for the county's process. Mm-hmm. So we would talk with the landowner, we would schedule a time to visit the property. The landowner would also fill out an application. Once we have that application and we visited the property, we're able to rank it using our evaluation criteria system, which is different for both of our conservation boards. So then once that project is ranked, we're able to see where does it lie on our waiting list. If it's up high on the top, we would be able to start on that project sooner than later. If it's a little bit lower on the list, it could take a handful of years to be able to be ready to move forward with that project.
Okay, so their application is then with the boards to be evaluated for a little while,
yes.
Going through that process. Okay. So you mentioned the local land trust being involved in the process. What does that look like, and why is that a good idea, or why do we use land trusts?
Yeah, so I think land trusts are really our partners in this work. It's almost like we're able to double our staff and double our funding by partnering with our local land trusts. So really they are the experts in this conservation easement field. Land trusts all over the nation are doing this work, all over the world. But they have access to more staff than the county has focused on this project, on this work. And then they also have access to different funds. So where the county might be limited to submit 4 grant applications a year, the land trust could also submit an additional 4 because it's a different agency. So we're able to maximize more funding, as well as land trusts have access to private funds too. So we're really able to get the most out of our conservation work by partnering with them.
Yeah, it sounds like we can be a little more flexible when we kind of start those applications there and then move them through our processes. Mm-hmm. So let's say a landowner has put in for their easement with the land trust, and now they're ready to come to the board here, either the Land Conservation Advisory Board or the Ag Advisory Board. What happens then with that application? You said something about the ranking. But what is that board really doing and looking at, and what are they scoring exactly in that application?
Yeah, so basically once either Soil and Water or a land trust deems an application ready to move forward, so they would then bring it to either Soil and Water would bring it to the Ag Advisory Board, and a land trust would bring that application to the Land Conservation Advisory Board. So both processes are similar in approval. We just have different ranking systems. So really what that would look like is the land trust has deemed that project ready to move forward. They bring it to the board. They do a presentation to the Land Conservation Advisory Board. And then the board then goes out and visits that property with a land trust representative. So they're boots on the ground, getting to have a firsthand experience at what this property is like. So they're also meeting the landowner, making sure all of their objectives are in the right place, and then after they've had the site visit, they do the actual board evaluation. So they evaluate for different types of environmental importance, historic importance, water quality benefits, farmland importance, all of those types of factors. We have much more detailed information on that if anyone's interested. But then we basically have that ranking available for the board, and the board then makes an official vote to approve that project. So once that has happened, then county staff brings it to the Board of Commissioners meeting and requests proposes that the commissioners allocate a certain amount of funding and approve that conservation easement project. So then once that has happened, it's an official county project, and it has funding allocated to it, and it can move forward.
So the process is one of the boards, approval, after all of that hard work and boots on the ground you were mentioning, and then it goes to commissioners, and ultimately the commissioners make that final choice.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
The advisory boards are really just recommending these projects to the commissioners for their final approval.
So you mentioned the ranking criteria the boards use to evaluate those projects. Tell me a little bit more about how that criteria was created. Where did it come from?
Yeah, so the boards have created, each individual board has created this criteria based on a research-based process. So staff and the boards have worked together to research what other counties and other states are doing in similar type programs. And we're making sure that we're using similar, well-thought-through evaluation systems. So Ag Advisory and LCAB systems are different based on the fact that they focus on different areas and different priorities. But all have been really well thought through and are backed by research.
So another part of the open space bonds are these passive recreation lands. And I know they have a connection to conservation, but can you kind of knit that story for us together? What does that really mean, that passive recreation lands involve conservation?
Yeah, I think that, ultimately, these passive recreation lands will be open to the public. We also see them as a way to protect open space for the public. And really, we'd want to focus on protecting, open space that would have high conservation values. So ultimately, I think the goal is that these passive recreation parks or lands will be protected in a conservation easement. So we will evaluate them with some similar criteria as some of our boards have in their systems to really prioritize those environmental qualities.
So it sounds like there's a lot of opportunities to get involved in conservation in Buncombe County. What are some ways, if people are more interested or really want to get their hands dirty with this work, how could they get involved here in Buncombe County?
Yeah, I think a great way to get involved is either if you're interested personally in doing a conservation easement, you can reach out to Soil and Water or a local land trust. The three land trusts that we work with in Buncombe County is Riverlink, Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy, and Conserving Carolina. So you could check out their websites. If you want to be very active and actually you could participate on one of our advisory boards if there are openings. So you could look up the Land Conservation Advisory Board or the Ag Advisory Board and see if those are openings if you want to be involved in that way. And then also we have a passive recreation land subcommittee as well.
And you can also watch those meetings too, right? Or come and participate and just sit in the meetings if you're interested in the kinds of projects that are moving forward.
Exactly. Yeah, all of those things are now, all of those meetings are now going to be on our Engage Buncombe website. So I'm sure we'll have links to share.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to do some rapid fire true/false questions about conservation.
I'm ready.
Okay. True or false? Bigger projects are more likely to get funded.
False. We have projects of all kinds.
Okay. True or false? You have to allow public access in order to get a conservation easement.
False. Most of our conservation easements actually restrict public access. Some of them allow some type of public access. That's part of the ranking system. But yeah, you do not have to require public access.
Okay. True or false? Once a landowner chooses a conservation easement, they have to restrict development.
A bit true, a bit false. So okay. Conservation easements, in that process, you can restrict all development if you choose. There are some ways we can plan for some slight development, a future barn, a future house site, those kinds of slight things. So they don't have to restrict all completely future development. Majority of future development.
Okay, last one. True or false? Once you enter into an easement or a conservation easement, you lose control of your property.
You do not lose control of your property. This is a landowner decision to enter a conservation easement, and so you still have complete control of your property, but you have made a commitment to no longer do development on the property. So yeah, you can still sell it, you can still hunt, lease it, use it for collateral, all of those kinds of things. You do not lose control, you just have decided to protect it in a certain way.
Thanks for clearing up those rumors. Thanks, Ariel.
Yeah, thank you.
Learn more about conservation in Buncombe County and explore interactive maps of past and current conservation projects by following the link to the Land Conservation Story Map above.